crossovers have always been the biggest buzz day in, day out when it comes to any media. Yes, even video games are no stranger to crossovers, of many different kinds, ranging from simple sports games to in-depth fighters and RPGs, bringing together two or more franchises to create something special. Fighting games are more often created as they pit two people's favourite franchises and have a dream match between fan favourites that wouldn't be possible in any other game. Some come and go, while others become extremely popular to spawn its own franchise, with such titles as Marvel vs. Capcom and Nintendo's Super Smash Bros., which has enjoyed 13 years of success. With only 3 games to its name on each of its consoles, starting from the Nintendo 64 to the GameCube and Wii. And with Nintendo hinting at a Wii U release of the 4th in the series coming up, Nintendo fans have a lot to be excited about, myself included. But what about the other consoles? With no fighting games to cater to their loyal fan base for their consoles, would there be any hope for fans to have a Super Smash Bros. To call their own? Well, after all this time, the newly formed company Superbot have answered the call, and now Sony have their very own fighting game which has just been recently released for both the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita, or Vita, under the title PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Now, this might sound weird to some of you, but not only am I a fan of Nintendo, but I am also a fan of Sony. Yeah, you're talking to a guy who played both Mario and Sonic games and supported both equally. Even though I didn't own a Sega console, and only owned a Super Nintendo at one point. Anyway, this title was a highly anticipated one, as many fans went into overdrive obsession during the game's production. Heck, even I myself became highly excited as soon as I saw the trailer for this game. As I grew up with a PlayStation most of my life, I couldn't wait to see what this game had in store for its loyal fan base. So, with Superbot taking the reins of creating this grand Sony crossover that celebrates the years of PlayStation history, do we have a battler worthy of being remembered for the ages of PlayStation? Or does it fall short of its grand dream match? Let's jump into the battle and find out, shall we? There isn't much of a story as it can only be found within arcade mode, where in each character's story, they or the narrator from their original games would describe their situation based around the games they originally came from, and then head out into the world for one reason or another, which usually amounts to them going out to prove themselves against a force of people gathered by a certain individual that they so happen to hear about, or with a certain character searching for something. These stories are represented with still image cutscenes for both the intros and endings, and a short animated cutscene for each character's rival. Now, even though this sort of storytelling is standard to your typical bare-bones fighting game, which isn't bad per se, but the way it's executed leaves much to be desired, as they are, for lack of a better term, not very well thought out. What makes its story miss the mark is that they never show the character's reaction to their world being invaded by foreign worlds, and seem to act completely unfazed and normal, even in rival battles. It's alright for characters to act and use their own world terminology as a basis for their logic, but the problem lies that they don't seem to bat an eyelid whenever they go to a place or see something not of their world. I mean, seriously, if I was, say, Nathan Drake, sure I could probably accept that there was a medieval skeleton knight running around, but I think I would have a nervous breakdown seeing a cyborg swordsman and a flat two-dimensional rapping dog while a giant mech is in the distance ready to fire its artillery on us. It just feels odd when a character should be reacting to the situation that's going on, but instead continues to act like they're in their own world when that is not the case, especially in their ending sequences. Also, the rival battles, while doing a good job to tie together characters with similarities or opposites and certain traits from the original stories they came from, lacks any real motive for most of the characters and go into your typical trope of getting into a fight with each other for very little reason out of nowhere. But there are a few exceptions that do make sense, and even a couple can be really hilarious in its light-hearted nature.
Another demon sent by this so-called god. He can join the rest.
ice cream cone. That was a mistake, buddy.
A mistake I can correct, if you like.
Maybe you didn't hear me, friend. There's a debt here, and I'm ready to settle up.
Stand aside.
Pick that up and pay for it.
The ghost of Sparta bends to no mortal.
So while the story in arcade mode lacks punch, it was still serviceable to its credit. It just feels like there were a lot of missed opportunities to really go full swing with the concept that Superbot set for this game. But at the very least, there is a good set of characters to play with. From the get-go, as soon as you turn on the game, you'll have access to all 20 characters that the game has to offer, which is a good strong number for a first-time game created by a new company. Well, at least compared to the likes of BlazBlue that started with only 12 in its roster. Each fighter in the roster has their own unique fighting style to best suit any player's playstyle, with fan favourites such as Kratos of God of War fame, Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series, Cole McGrath from the Infamous series, and many more, including classics like Spike from Ape Escape, Parappa the Rapper's very own, Parappa, and my personal fave and main fighter from Medieval, Sir Daniel Fortescue. This is where Superbot deserves a lot of credit, as they took characters out of their element and created movesets unique to them that represent the core elements from the games they come from, which translated well into a fighting game. However, there are two big oversights within its cast of strong fighters. One being the obvious question of, where are the most influential icons of PlayStation? Where are Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Solid Snake, and Cloud Strife, just to name a few characters that were big names that made PlayStation into a household name? These particular characters not being involved baffles me, but whether this was a third-party problem or issues with licensing agreements isn't known. But in some respects, it can be forgiven, but without their presence, this only strengthens the main problem, which is not helped by the second oversight in the roster. Two particular characters in this roster, Raiden from Metal Gear Solid and Dante from Devil May Cry. Oh no! Not that version! Yes, that one. The reboot version of Dante. While both of their presences are appreciated, the thing is, they both stick out like a pair of sore thumbs. By not using the original iconic appearance of Dante, seriously, it's not even an extra costume, and by using a character who by all rights hasn't proven himself worthy of being called an all-star, and is just in by game name alone, with both of their games they star in not even out yet, Superbot have lost sight of what its original intentions for this game were, and that was to bring together characters of the past to commemorate PlayStation's long history. With characters like this, and a Bioshock stage from Bioshock Infinite that too isn't out yet either, feels more like they are only celebrating a small part of its history, namely its present and future, with not many nods to its roots, which is made more apparent that only 5 characters in this roster are from the first PlayStation lineup. But with Superbot already announcing 2 DLC characters to join the fray, we can only hope that more will be on the way to add the ones missing in action, who can still make it to the party fashionably late. Not that there isn't any certain characters I would want from any particular franchise on PlayStation to make it into this game, mind you. Before I go more in depth into gameplay, I feel that there is something that needs to be nipped in the bud, so to speak, and that is with its gameplay style that has made people cry out that this game is a blatant rip-off of the Super Smash Bros. Formula. I would like to bring up a point when it comes to the video game industry. Yes, some video games do unashamedly steal ideas from others. However, in this case it's different, as this is considered a gameplay style. I mean, come on, if we had to complain about games just because they use a certain style to enjoy the experience, then that would mean every fighting game ever created after the first fighting game in existence was stealing from that one too. There, I have said my piece on this matter. But with that in mind, does this game take all of its inspiration from Super Smash Bros? In this case, the answer would be yes. And no. Okay, hear me out. Even though the gameplay style takes a lot after Super Smash Bros. With its simple controls of pressing either the square, triangle or circle buttons, with or without pressing one of the directional buttons with either the D-pad or left analog stick in order to pull off a different attack, as well as being able to jump and attack in the air, perform free grapples, and pick up and use items that are dropped into the fight along with even blocking and evading mechanics. It also mixes in the complexity of performing combos from other standard fighting games, and surprisingly, this makes a great, and dare I say, a fun mix between the two styles of fighting, making it enjoyable for both casual and hardcore players alike, though you will have to learn a few combos from either experimentation or from the combo trials. I will get to that in a few moments. As for the battling side of things, every character has their own distinct advantages and disadvantages to the fight, not in how strong or weak they are, but rather in their different playstyles. Like for example, Big Daddy may be the slowest character and lacks an extensive number of combos, but he can still pack a huge punch and even has plasmids like ice to slow an opponent down. And Radek, who has a huge repertoire of guns, makes him perfect for long-range combat, though he still has some close quarters capabilities that still requires choosing the right attack for the right moment. As far as I could tell, each character has been balanced nicely, encouraging learning the character's moves and using their greatest strengths to their advantage, with no clear advantage being given to one particular character, making battles not only fun but also fair, putting a great emphasis on finding the best character that suits your style of play. Usually in fighting games, the object of the match would be that you have to beat the opponent until his health depletes, or in certain games, thrown out of the ring. But this is where Superbot tries something a little different, with a new system called the Super Mechanic. Unlike most fighting games, PlayStation All-Stars requirements to win a match is based on the number of knockouts via specials you've done on opponents, and even how many times you have been knocked out. The way matches go is that while you're attacking your opponents, your fighter will gain a set number of energy called AP, which fills up the bar here, and when it fills to full, you can use a level 1 super move, or if you hold out longer and continue the fight, you can fill the bar to get either a level 2 or 3 super, with the third taking a bit more effort to fill up. I was a little worried about this mechanic, as I thought at first that it would be pointless to get anything higher than a level 1, and people would just happily spam that every match, while also making it a race to the special. However, as soon as I gave the system a chance and explored each character, I ended up finding that thankfully this wasn't the case. Each character, like their moves, have varied differences in how their supers will work, and requiring technique and skill in using either a level 1 or 2 super, while the level 3s are the surefire kills for a knockout. But to counterbalance that, it requires a bit more AP in order to get it. But some of the time you will find that depending on characters, it's far more beneficial to go for the best supers that will net you the most points, and that in itself is a downside. Not a big one, but a little flawed. For example, in Heihachi Mishima's case, it's far more useful to get his level 2 super, as on a good run, it can get more knockouts more so than his level 3 super, which is a one-time only screen clearer of all opponents at once. It's not bad, but it's a nitpick on my part. The fighting system is really strong, as even if you get the upper hand in momentum, there are still a few things that can take the wind out of your sails. If you either get hit by certain attack items, grappled, get hit by stage hazards, or on certain stages fall off the stage, you will end up losing a set number or a good chunk of your AP you've accumulated, which your opponents can add to their own AP meter by walking over them, essentially making battles into a tug of war. Though one could argue that you're choosing the characters based on their specials, but it could also be argued that each character's supers have their own distinct strategy to master in order to properly utilize them. But either way, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the system worked and was a lot of fun to play. After you finish arcade mode that consists of 8 matches, with all the characters at least once, there really isn't any point in going through it all again. So what is left after that? Sadly, the answer to that question is not very much. The only other modes Superbot have created are basically basic and advanced tutorials, a set number of challenges based around gameplay, and the fighters, who each have their own number of challenges to complete, along with combo and move trials, where you follow a set of instructions explaining what buttons to press and teach you some of the characters' movesets and combos. So if you bought this game for single player experience, then I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. If anything, this game was made more for multiplayer, as 4 players can play in matches both on the couch with friends and online against other players around the world. Offline you get the standard timed free-for-all match to get as many kills as possible within a set time limit, along with 2 other match types: stock, where you have a set number of lives for a defeat, and kill limit, where much like a standard deathmatch in a first-person shooter game, a player must reach the set number of knockouts to win the match. These matches offer an okay variety, but nothing to write home about, but still quite a bit of fun. While in the online section, not only can you invite your friends who also have the game to join you, you can even search online for any other players who are also looking for a free-for-all or 2-on-2 match, where your teammate could be someone from online, or even your friend on the same system. Despite having a good connection to the battles that experience no lag online, as far as I played, there are rare occasions where you could get disconnected, or worse, the match suddenly becomes glitched. However, Superbot have planned patches to fix these problems, but other than that, its online functionality is really strong. If there was anything wrong with the game, it would be these 2 things. 1. The boss fight against Polygon Man is too easy. Despite having a vague but interesting megalomaniac personality with a couple of cool quotes, his fight has him only using polygon clones to fight against you, while turning into one of the character stage hazards from one of the other stages. And once you finish off the clones, he tries to crush you with his head, leaving him open for attack. This fight could have done with some extra improvements on his attacks, like he could have used lasers from his eyes, or even come apart to hit you with his polygons. Just feels like this boss battle could have done with a bit more time to flesh out this battle, and some extra intro quotes wouldn't have hurt either. The other problem is that while the game rewards you with a lot of unlockables, like some cool extra costumes, except Dante, and even being able to customize characters' animations of how they enter a fight, win a fight, taunt, and the victory music that plays when they win are really good additions. What takes the fun out of it is that it only applies to player 1, meaning even if someone on the same system plays as a character you or your friend modified animations for, the changes will only work for the first player. And what makes it worse that while the game gives you a goal of reaching a rank of 300 to unlock everything with every given character, there isn't any point in going beyond rank 100, as that is the cutoff point for the last animation you unlock, and during and after that, you will unlock useless icons and background images for your player ID. And speaking of useless, early on in the rankings you also unlock minions, one for each character, that don't do anything other than dance and cheer when you get a multi-kill. These are only aesthetics, which isn't extra content, unless it actually puts a twist on gameplay, or is a new game mode, stage, or character, then it is not content. It just feels like padding, which doesn't feel very rewarding for all the effort you put into leveling up to such a high level. From a technical standpoint, the graphics are really good, with all the characters and stages matching the styles of the games they come from, while still having a consistent style that merges and connects the worlds of Sony's franchises happily and runs the game at a decent speed, without any problems. The animations are really well done, and even how the characters fight have been made well, showing off Superbot's knowledge of the PlayStation characters through characteristics in their movements. But what steals the show is how Superbot were able to have one or more worlds invade each stage, as each one has a different way that pops in on the original world scene you're fighting in. Though sometimes it's hard to notice as your eyes are more fixated on the fight at hand. The battle visuals look decent, and characters' appearances have been recreated perfectly. Though at times I swore that Nathan Drake's face looked a bit odd, but other than that I wasn't able to find anything else that seemed out of the ordinary graphically speaking. Though the main menu does look a tad cheap. But the one thing I didn't expect to like so much was the music. The musics played in the stages are either the original or a rendition of a game's theme from the original game that the stage is based on. And as the other world comes into play, the music is then remixed with another piece of music from that game's second world. It's just so surprising to hear two pieces of music you never expect to blend well together sound so interesting and even catchy. So how the game presents itself is well done. So, in conclusion, did Superbot create the game all PlayStation fans have been clamoring for? Well, on its own merits, it is a pretty good starting point with a decent number of characters to choose from, with an interesting take on the fighting genre with super mechanic and a strong online mode, makes this into a fun party game for both local and online play. However, because of its not well thought out story, lack of any real content to encourage gamers to play, lack of any interesting or worthwhile modes to play, and it leaving you feeling like a good chunk of its past history is missing, makes this really hard to recommend paying full price for the game, even with the PS Vita version that comes free with every PS3 copy of the game. This game has fallen far from its true potential, and feels less like an all-star game, and more of a half-star game. If the team at Superbot Entertainment spent more time improving on some of these ideas, then it might have done better. But does that mean we shouldn't buy this game in the end? No. Call me naive and stupid, but as I hold this game in my hands, I do not find I regret my decision. Unlike other companies I've had the disdain for their oversight in their newer titles like Soul Calibur 5, I don't have the heart to slate this game badly, as this was Superbot's first game that their company had created and released, and it was obvious from how they spoke that they had only the fans' interests at heart, as they are fans themselves. Instead, I urge that if any of you are in any way a fan of PlayStation's history, we must support this game, so then we can show Superbot and other possible third-party companies that we are interested, and we want to see more. We want them to improve vastly on what they have given. We want to see this concept succeed, not just for them and their potential future, but for us too, so that there may be a time when this idea could become something amazing and special to our hearts.
Power is an illusion.
absolute power is a seamless illusion.
Like the reviewer thinks he's wearing pants? What?